A very good morning, everyone, and warm welcome to the Financial Conclave 2021 that we are hosting on a virtual platform. So we are starting and beginning the morning with the workshop that we are conducting with Amazon Web Services, which is on a security audit and compliance on a cloud. So we are having eminent panelists from AWS to deliver this workshop. As we know that the since last 1 or 2 years, uh, we are embarking on cloud journey, and most of the organizations are realizing the importance of a cloud. In terms of their business requirements, there is a need of customer demands, scalability, agility to run the services. So, considering all that, there is a definitely a sense and need to adopt the cloud, and organizations are realizing it. But while we are embarking on a cloud, while we are adopting a cloud, whether it is a public cloud or virtual private cloud, security and privacy are definitely a key aspects that we need to think. So today we are having the researcher experts from AWS who is going to talk about security aspects on a cloud. So when we are on a cloud, it is the shared responsibility of a cloud service provider, of a managed service provider, and cloud customer. So we will try to throw light on how cloud security and shared responsibility model looks like on a cloud. And apart from that, organizations always have a question: will be my audit and compliance will be the same on a cloud, or how do I manage effective compliance in terms of security and data protection on a cloud, and how I do still comply with the regulatory framework in terms of audits and compliance. So I think we have power pack agenda today, which will take us on different fundamentals and aspects of a cloud security, shared responsibility model, how to audit and secure the workloads on a cloud. So all these fundamental things which we're going to discuss, and we will try to make it more interactive. So we have a few quiz up for you to answer, and we will try to interact with you, try to gain some insights from you, and then we will deliberate it together. So please feel free to ask questions you have, and we will be able to answer those questions. Secondly, please also participate in a quiz and try to participate in this workshop. So without further delay, I would like to call our speaker and expert from AWS, who is Amandeep Singh. So Amandeep Singh, little bit about him. So he is a cybersecurity professional. He has over 15 years of experience, and he has worked with organizations across different industry verticals and helped solve complex cybersecurity problems. So in his current role with AWS India, he is providing the customers the assurance and confidence to operate their regulated workloads on a cloud. So and not to and to mention specifically that he is also winner of top 100 CISO awards in 2011. So I would like to welcome Amandeep on the screen, and please.
Hi Vivek, thanks for the nice introduction. Glad to be partnering with DSA on this wonderful event. I hope I can add value. Thanks again.
Yeah. So in the beginning itself, we wanted to run one quiz question that we wanted to understand what are your expectations from this particular workshop. So when we talk about cloud, different people come from a different audience profile. Some people come from capability providers, some people come from the user industry. So we wanted to understand what are your expectations from this workshop, so that it will help us to mold it in such a way that you will get benefits out of it. So I'll share my screen. Please let me know once you see the screen. You can send a thumbs up once you see my screen. Yeah. So now we'll start the quiz. So you need to go to the www.kahoot.it on your screen. So it's a KAHOOT.IT, kahoot.it. And once you land up on a kahoot.it, you need to enter the game pin, which is loading right now. Yeah, so this is the game pin for you. So you please enter this game pin. So it's a 6399364. So we'll wait for people to join. Okay, people are joining. So I request everyone to join quickly so that we can begin discussion. We'll wait for 30 more seconds. So it's a Kahoot.it, KHOOT.it, and enter this game pin which we have 6399 364. If you are facing any difficulties joining, please drop a message into the chat window. Our team will help you to log in, because quiz are a part which we wanted to make it more interactive. Okay, so meanwhile people will join. Amandeep, would you like to talk about the objective of this workshop before we present? Meanwhile people join. I think they're still joining.
Sure, Vivek. As you rightly pointed out, so essentially we are going to focus on three key areas related to the cloud. One is going to be security, how security impacts the cloud and what really customers can do to secure their workloads in the cloud. Second is compliance, because so many times we hear questions from the customers: can we really adopt cloud and still comply with our local regulatory requirements, laws? There are localizations, all those usual suspects and usual questions that we have. We would want to take them head on and address that. And last but not the least, some of the additional questions that we get from the customers is related to audit. How do we really audit cloud? We cannot audit cloud because it is hosted by a CSP. We don't know where the data center is, and all those questions. That is the third area where we would like to address. One interesting bit, it will not only be a one-way theoretical session. As Vivek rightly said, we will want to pitch in few questions on Kahoot during the session.
Yeah.
And secondly, there is one part in the workshop where I would want to give some hands-on on how whatever controls that we're talking about, how do they look on AWS console, so that audience can have more hands-on view of how it is done on the cloud.
Yeah. Thanks, Amandeep, for that quick introduction. So I think now let's play the quiz that we are having it. So I will just start the quiz. Okay, so first question, that what is your expectation from this session? So you can choose the triangle or maybe shape that respects to the right answer, or maybe the answer in your mind. You can choose the triangle, circle, or maybe a diamond on your phone, whatever expectation that you are looking for. Okay. So learn about cloud security. Most of the people are saying learning about cloud security. Okay, so that helps. And some of the people are also saying that how to comply with Indian regulators while using commercial cloud. I think yes, that's one of the key objective that we have today. That how to ensure the compliance while on a cloud. Okay, so I'll stop sharing, Amandeep, and I will hand over to you now to quickly begin and touch upon all these aspects which are having in audience mind.
Sure. I think glad to know that the feedback that we have got from the audience essentially does align to the objectives that we also have for the workshop. So these are the 5 key takeaways that we want to achieve out of this workshop today. One, understand cloud security and shared responsibility model. Shared responsibility model is really interesting and key to understand the security in the cloud. Number two, we would want to dive deep into key considerations while auditing cloud workloads. So if you want to audit cloud workloads, what are the key considerations? What are the areas? And for each of the areas, what are the things that you should and you would do to audit? Number three, audit and compliance automation in AWS Cloud. You can see in is both in caps and in a different color. I think once we get to share responsibility model, you will get a better understanding how what in of the cloud and off the cloud concepts are. So we would want to touch base on automation aspect. We don't want to say, okay, just have a checklist and then start running checklist for the audit. But instead, we would want to dive into how you can automate some of those controls, not only for your auditors, but also for your compliance teams and potentially for the regulators as well. Next, I would like to share available tools and resources. So there are host of tools, white papers, resources, checklists available. Most of them without or free of cost that can help you go through a journey of auditing cloud workloads. And last but not the least, what are AWS offerings to enable auditing off the cloud? So off the cloud is something if you want to audit the CSP. In the cloud is something if you want to host your own workload, which are hosted on the cloud. So there are certain offerings that AWS already has, and it provides to our regulated customers in the financial sector as well, which customers can leverage to audit the CSP. So without any further ado, let's get started with section one. So first section is going to talk about cloud security and shared responsibility model. For all of us to be on the same page, I have pulled out this definition from NIST 800-145 document. It specifies cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. It can be network, servers, storage, applications, services that can be rapidly provisioned and released with a minimal management effort. So some of the points that you see are bold as well as italics, which includes ubiquitous, which means access has to be available anywhere and everywhere. It should be convenient. It should be on demand. So it's not something that for every time that you need to access cloud computing, you first need to call your cloud service provider, want him or her to set up the server, then you can log in. That essentially is not cloud computing. Again, shared pool of configurable resources. Of course, whenever we have conversations with the customers, most of the time the start talking point is cost. So customers always start the conversations, okay, yeah, how do cost really matter in cloud? And one of the reasons or one of the USPs that has been there for cloud computing over the past few years and over a decade now, shared pool of resources, because there are millions of servers that a CSP has. There are so many data centers that as a CSP they can offer to the customers. The costs of the capital expenditure can be brought down and can be shared among the different customers. That obviously helps the cost part. And also, it's a new normal. So it's a way to run applications, networks, and other resources like a utility service. So essentially, once, like we have electricity in our homes, right? If we switch on the button, there the fan turns on or the tube light turns on. It's similar like that. Once you switch off the cloud services for your applications, it's just like electricity. It will work automatically. You don't need to worry about the backend infrastructure, managing the huge data centers, managing the servers, managing the hardware. Leave those things to the CSP while you can focus on your core business and essentially running the applications for supporting your business requirements. Essential characteristics, as I mentioned previously, these are important to understand. And I'm just setting the context so that all of us are on the same page. I assume that most of the audience members would already be aware of some of these basics, so I'll not spend too much time on these slides. The on-demand self-service, so it has to be a self-service. So second, broad network access, you should be able to access it from anywhere and everywhere. Resource pooling, So it's a shared pool of resources which is there for the cloud. Rapid elasticity. Elasticity is one of the key drivers which we think has helped adoption of cloud across the globe. And also we have seen adoption of cloud in Indian market, in financial sector. A lot of customers have been adopting cloud. And one of the key drivers has also been the startups. So we have customers who are all in on the cloud. They don't really even want to set up their own data centers. They start their journey on the cloud. They have their entire infrastructure on the cloud. And as they grow, they obviously expand their infrastructure on the cloud itself. That rapid elasticity is something which is one of the unique selling propositions for the cloud as well. So you don't really need to plan for the capacity. In the previous generation, previous days, a decade ago, whenever we had to procure an application, we need to sit with our IT infra teams. Okay, we need 2 servers. This is the RAM we need. This is the network capacity we need. This is the storage we need. All those things have to be talked out first. And once the server arrives, potentially in 6 to 8 weeks, if we are lucky, then it sometimes can be the case, either the requirements have increased, so that server might not really be adequate to meet your current requirements, or it might be over provisioned. So essentially, you don't even need that kind of a capacity. So that kind of thing existed in the traditional IT environment, which essentially can be taken care of in the cloud environment. So you can essentially configure resources, only the ones that you need. If you need more, it can be automatically, elastically, rapidly expanded into hundreds and thousands of servers within minutes. Forget about 6 to 8 weeks for procuring one server. You can have hundreds of servers which can actually come online within minutes. Then, of course, measure service. So everything that you do on cloud, any access that you touch, any resource, everything has to be measured. That's again another characteristic that we need to be cognizant of. In the traditional on-premise environment, so now we are getting into the details of security, how essentially security has worked in the traditional on-premise environments. So in our traditional on-prem environments where customers are having their own data centers, they are managing their servers, they are managing their racks, they are managing virtually everything that is listed down on this slide. So we can start from the bottom of the screen, which talks about hardware and global infrastructure. So you manage the data centers, you manage the network locations, you manage the data centers again, in case there are multiple. Then for the software, you manage compute, storage, database, networking, all those things you have to manage end to end. So it's not just that you are managing the instance, but even entire IT infrastructure has to be managed. And on top of that, you obviously have encryption, you have server-side data, you have network traffic, firewall, operating system, platforms, data. So everything that we can think of in a traditional on-prem environment, customer has to take ownership and manage the entire gamut of activities. Does it really add value for a company who is focused potentially, let's say, on online business, a startup, maybe into food industry, retail, banking? Does it add value to really go into managing things which don't really add much value from the business perspective? And secondly, they still do present challenges that we talked about around elasticity and procurement. So this is potentially one of the solutions that you can think of, which is cloud. And this is the concept that we want to talk about. It's a shared responsibility. In this slide, in the traditional on-premise secure environment, everything is being owned and managed by the customer. So essentially, entire security is also a responsibility with the customer. In the cloud model, however, the security responsibility is shared. So it is shared between the customer and the cloud service provider, in this case, AWS. For example, when you procure cloud services, essentially your global infrastructure, whether it is regions, availability zones, edge locations, essentially wherever the data centers are located, those data centers, physical access, environmental security controls, racks, how they are configured, everything is managed by the CSP. So that heavy lifting on the physical hardware side and infrastructure side is done by the CSP. Secondly, compute, storage, database, networking, all those infrastructure elements on top of which you can build your applications, all those infrastructure elements are also managed by the CSP. So security of those infrastructure elements is also responsibility of the CSP. However, that does not mean that once you move to the cloud, or if you already are on the cloud, that entire security responsibility will go with the CSP, so you can just stop worrying about security. That's not how it is. So as I said, it's a shared responsibility. For some elements like infrastructure, IT infrastructure, global infrastructure like data centers, responsibilities with the CSP, while on top of it, in a teal blue color that you can see, most important thing, and this is one point that we need to take away out of this session, data that you host on cloud, irrespective of any model, irrespective of any deployment, irrespective of any type of service that you procure from the cloud service provider, data will always be in your control and in your ownership. Your data will never be the responsibility or the ownership or under control of a CSP. That is one key takeaway that I want to highlight. Secondly, apart from data, any application that you build on top of that, even identity and access management. So if you want to add new users, you want to restrict access from the users, you want to create policies for different user groups and different roles, all those things you will still be able to manage and you will still be required to manage. Third, operating system. So for operating system in cloud, there are two aspects. One is the host operating system, which is obviously the hypervisor and system on top of which you build the applications and different servers. So the guest operating system will still be managed and responsibility will lie with the customers. And of course, firewall configuration is another. As I took an example, if I move to cloud, I don't need to really worry about any security. That's not the case. Even in the cloud, the firewall configurations, like in AWS, we call it security groups, you can configure and you will have the responsibility to see what ports are allowed into your network, what ports are allowed to, what traffic is allowed to move out of your network. You can create a virtual private cloud. You can create subnets. You can have different virtual subnets to segregate your departments or different organizations. All those things can still be done and will have to be done. And last part is around encryption. Again, encryption is something that you will manage on the cloud. Keys are something that you can always hand over the responsibility to the cloud. So there are different models of managing the keys. You can use manage key managed services that AWS provides or other cloud service providers might provide. You can have encryption, encrypted data directly move into the cloud. So essentially, you just don't use any of the encryption service provided by the CSP. And third can be a mixed model, so where you encrypt the data using the service provided by the CSP, but the keys infrastructure, you still keep it with you. So you manage the keys, private, public keys in your key management infrastructure. And finally, you can always also have integrated a cloud HSM in case you really want to have the hardware security module level of details and that level of for compliance requirements or for your security requirements. So this is something which forms as a base for our discussion today, that security is a shared responsibility in the cloud environment. There will be some elements which CSP will be responsible for from security perspective, while there will be other elements where customer will have to own the responsibility. From the CSP side, I want to go a little detail on because we talked about at the bottom of the slide what are the things that AWS and the CSP is managing. Now we'll go into a bit more detail of what are those elements. Of course, security by design, operate by industry-leading security teams. So this is mainly about AWS, and this is something which we take very, very seriously. Security essentially is our top priority. We start with security and then build services on top of that. It's not something that we build services, just release it for the customer, then security comes as an afterthought. That's not how it is done. We also say it's a zero-day thing for us. So before we don't agree on the security architecture, we don't really architect our services. Second, security infrastructure, which is built to satisfy healthcare, military, global banks, and other high sensitive organizations. This I'm saying with a huge responsibility. This is not something I'm just saying that, okay, healthcare, military, global banks can use cloud and that will be secure. But instead, what I want to bring to your attention that already there are organizations across the world and also in India from different regulated entities, banks, healthcare organizations who are already using cloud for hosting the most sensitive workloads. So one of the questions, one of the expectations of the session as people have, okay, can I really comply with Indian regulations and laws while using cloud? Answer is yes. Of course, I'll try to address that during my session, how further you can use cloud to comply with those regulations. Third, if anyone of in the audience has uh, participated in getting compliance done for their organization, let's say you want to get certified for ISO 27001 or you want to get certified for AWS,
I think there are some disturbance. I think we lost Amandeep's audio as well as video. Just give us a minute and then we'll be back.
can you hear me?
Hello? We are having little bit technical difficulty, so we're trying to resolve it. And Amandeep will be back in 2 or 3 minutes. So meanwhile, I think let's. So Amandeep was talking about the cloud shared responsibility model, right? So he was talking about who owns the responsibility of infrastructure, who owns the responsibility of protecting data and data encryption, as well as enabling the security control. On the similar lines, we have the next quiz. I think meanwhile he joined, we can join for that particular quiz. So I will put up the second quiz question on screen. So the procedure is same, that uh, that you will be logging in using the game pin, and then you will answer that particular quiz. Okay. Oh, let me share my screen. Okay, I think there is some issue. Okay. Okay, so this is the next question that we are it is about the last question. So Anurag answered it quickly. So now next quiz is about who is responsible for the security in a cloud. So just now we discussed that. So you need to select the right icon against the answer. Okay, so only one person is saying that security is shared responsibility, because that's the right answer. And just now we discussed about it that security is a shared responsibility when you are on a cloud, because as Amandeep mentioned that the cloud infrastructure, the physical compute, networking, and data, that is completely owned by cloud provider, whereas whatever at the operating system level which we built on the hypervisor, and above that data as well as application networking, which is the responsibility of a cloud customer. So so I think Amandeep is joined now. So Amandeep, meanwhile you join, we just played a quiz which we ask about the who is the responsible for security in a cloud. So
Okay.
so it's a very mixed response that we got. But I think again at the end of the session we'll play again the same quiz and try to get insights from audience that what they think about the shared responsibility on a cloud.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I saw the response. It's completely spread across all the four options. I think that's good. If audience has those views, then this session potentially will try to address that and get to the one final. So apologies, sincere apologies. I mean, we can prepare for all the technology, but sometimes there are disconnections. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, now we can hear you clearly.
Okay, perfect. So apologies again. So I just get to, so I was at 50 compliance certifications. So what I was referring to, if any of in the audience members, if you have gone through the journey of actually getting your organization compliant to different standards like ISO 20000, CI, you know it's a tedious task. It's not something that you can just get it done very easily. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of management commitment, and a lot of resources to get compliant to even one compliance certification. But the cloud service like AWS already have 50 plus global compliance certification on which you will actually build your application on top of it. You name it, we potentially have it. So whether it is ISO 27001, 27017, 27018, PCI DSS compliant infrastructure, you can access the SOC reports, you can host your HIPAA enabled workloads. We are also in panel with MITI, Ministry of Electronics and IT in India, and audited by STQC as part of that panel as well. So from that perspective, you should be rest assured that the infrastructure that we are going to use for hosting your critical or sensitive data, that is already compliant and audited by multiple auditors across the globe and also specifically in India as well. Finally, the last thing, there are security enhancements from 1 million plus customer experiences. What we mean here is that we learn, we are customer obsessed, we always start with customers and move backwards. So it's been now over a decade that AWS started. And there are so many customers who have given such a wonderful feedback for us to further enhance the security services. So the security enhancements, which happen virtually every year, every month, these are all based on the customer requirements and customer experiences that they share. Next one is security and compliance in AWS Cloud. I'm going to just dive in.
Just sorry to interrupt. Can you share your screen right now? We are not able to see your screen.
Okay. Again.
Yeah.
Now,
Now we can see it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So security and compliance in AWS Cloud. So essentially, as I said, so I want to dive a little deeper into what as a CSP, what as a cloud service provider does AWS manage? It's a shared responsibility. That doesn't mean that, okay, all the complicated parts are with the customer and all the easy parts are with the cloud service provider. That's not what we are trying to achieve. We want to own up a share which we want to manage for all our customers so that customers can be uh, comfortable hosting their sensitive workloads on AWS cloud. So number one, global infrastructure. So there are regions and availability zones. We develop our data centers and we call the construct as availability zones. Availability zones are nothing but essentially one to n data center. So it's not just one data center. Some of our locations, there are more than 13 data centers which comprise of one availability zone. And it's not just that one data center and top of second floor, there's another data center. Availability zones also provide segregation so that if one availability zone goes down, other availability zone can always be there to support your DR objectives. Region is a location which we say, okay, in this particular country, we have a region, and that region comprises of 3 or more availability zones. For example, in India, we already have Mumbai region, and it comprises of 3 availability zones. And another good news is that we have already announced the second region in India, which is going to be live sometime in 2022. Obviously, then India will have 2 different regions, but each region will have multiple availability zones, and each availability zone, as I said, comprises of multiple data centers. So it actually ensures adequate resiliency so that even a failure of one component does not really impact your operations. Then, of course, you have edge location and point of presence. There are around 230 plus points of presence across 84 cities and 42 countries that we have. And then content delivery network that you can always leverage in case you want. You are a global enterprise, you are a startup who has operations outside India, who wants to reach out to customers in Europe, in Australia, in US, wherever you want to, in Africa, in Middle East. So you can always leverage the infrastructure that we have globally to really reach out to the customers as soon as possible. This is another thing which is essentially not possible as part of your environment. Second thing, we own and are responsible for physical and environmental security of our data centers. So all the controls that you name, you will have those implemented as part of this responsibility. And it's not something that I'm today saying in the session, but this is something which is validated and vetted and audited by third-party auditors. I talk about in the 5th part of this slide is compliance and assurance. Another thing that we manage is security of the compute, storage, database infrastructure. So underlying IT infrastructure, we manage the responsibility of security of that infrastructure. Hypervisor, on top of which you can build your own instances and your own application. That hypervisor security is also something that we manage. Then infrastructure availability and resiliency. So there are 2 aspects to this. One is resiliency and recovery at the application level. So that architecture has to be managed by the customer. However, the resiliency and availability of the underlying infrastructure is something that we manage. Network security, of course, if you are connecting to AWS, telecommunication is something that we will manage. Network segregation is something that we will provide you services. You can have those constructs and implement access controls. And finally, the network availability and resilience is something that we manage as part of our responsibility. Finally, as I said, so all those things, what we are trying to highlight here, these are the things that we manage as part of our responsibility. It doesn't mean that we're just saying it. So this can be vetted and validated through the 50 plus accreditation and certifications that we have. And we are audited by regulators, auditors across the globe, across the year. And that is something which they come and support these claims. Another important point to note is this. So it's not something that the AWS region in India will have different controls vis-a-vis AWS region in Singapore or Australia or US. Anywhere we receive a requirement from a customer which helps us enhance the security controls, they are essentially implemented across all our regions. So you can rest assured you have access to the most secure infrastructure any region that we want to use, whether it's a Mumbai region or whether it's any other region that we want to host your workloads. Physical security of the data center, I think this is one thing which you need to be aware of. We do get questions from customers, okay, how do you manage or secure your data centers? So there are buildings which are large scale data centers we have been building for many years now. Important attributes, these are non-descript facilities. From outside, even if it is Mumbai, you will never be able to know where Amazon data centers are, and there will be never any bookmarks or even road signs, or even outside the facility, you will see, okay, this is Amazon data center. So these are non-descript facilities. Perimeter controls, so the layered controls, even to get inside the data center. Forget about the internal zones that we have to provide additional security. Physical access. Access to data center is so strictly controlled that even the people who have physical access to the data centers, they never have any logical access to the data centers, and vice versa. If a team who is managing the logical services which are hosted on the cloud, they will never have a physical access to the data center. That is another segregation. Another thing is, as an employee, not many employees. You can actually count the number of employees who will have access to the data center. And even employees who will not be, most of the employees will not even be aware of where our data centers are located. So exact location is also not something that employees are also aware of. Two-factor authentication, so it's not just one, multiple factor authentication is just required even to get into the data center premises. Then need-based access, as I said, all access is locked and secured. This is something which takes care of physical security and separation of duties, as I mentioned. Logical access privileges, they are both segregated. Disk management, so we use proprietary disk management that prevents customers from accessing each other's data. This is something which is interesting. So we don't really want a shared pool of resources where one customer can see another. So that adequate segregation is something which is ensured. Disks are wiped prior to use. If today you want to just delete your resources, delete your data, maybe move out, do something else, or maybe add another application. If you delete something, same hardware is never re-provisioned without it is completely wiped out. This is something also audited at the time of various audits that we undergo. This can also be encrypted by the customer. In case you want additional compliance or additional security, you can always encrypt using different encryption services. Another important thing, that once a device is decommissioned, so if a hard disk is end of life, or it's faulty, or it has to be replaced, it doesn't really just come out like a hard disk. It is something which is completely degaused and physically destroyed. Physically destroyed, we are serious about it. This is the real example how the actual media comes out of data center, which can never be retrieved in any form. So this is the level of depth that we have from physical security. Customer side of responsibility, as I said, on top of the slide, like we said, there are multiple things that customers will still be responsible for. With identity, customer, AWS does provide you different services, including identity and access management. You can use organizations, you can use AWS Cognito, you can use AWS Directory Service, you can use single sign-on. All the services you can use to essentially manage the identity within your cloud infrastructure. Second is detective controls. This is another question that we usually get from many of the customers, and in some of the regulatory discussions. Okay, how do I manage logs and monitoring in the cloud? How do I manage the incidents because I don't have access to logs? That is not correct. So there are a host of services that you can use to have a detective control, or essentially have a monitoring and logging mechanisms built into the cloud. So essentially you can use AWS CloudTrail for any access from the time you log in. All the API calls are recorded and logged. You can use AWS Config, which manages all the resources that you may have configured on the cloud. I will obviously talk about it during the hands-on as well. Cloud Watch, which essentially sets the alarms. It also monitors the performance and capacity of your instances, and also raises the alarms in case any of the capacity or performance attributes go to a particular threshold. You can use guard duty, you can use VPC flow logs. Again, these are protections that you always have. Use protection for the guard duty you can always have as part of the infrastructure. Configurations of these things you will have to manage on your own. That's where I said this is security in the cloud, which is a security that you manage. All the services are being provided by AWS as a cloud service provider.
but all those things have to be configured by you as a customer. But once you have those configured, this is something which will provide you entire visibility into identity, detective control, even infrastructure security. So you can use a Shield, you can use a web application firewall. You have inspector to really assess how different groups are behaving. It's kind of a checklist also which tells you okay, what is working and what is not. VPC, virtual private cloud. Within the cloud, you can create your own small logical data center, which only you have access to. And if you configure them with a private address and maybe link it through VPN connection on your data center or from your office, there's no way externally on the internet anybody can access that construct, as long as you don't enable public access to your VPC or to your resources. Data protection is another. There are a host of services that you can use. You can use key management service. You can use cloud HSM in case it is required. Amazon Base is another interesting service, which is mainly about AI and ML based data classification service. So you can configure, identify the critical data sets that you think are important. Then Base can always, based on the AI ML algorithms, identify any data sets which are moving and even prevent. So you can obviously integrate that with CloudWatch to trigger alerts and alarms as you may want to. The certificate manager to manage the certificates, and also you have server-side encryption in case you want to implement at a server side. Incident response is another thing. Config rules. Oh, okay, one area which I want to touch base on. Config is something which I'll give you a brief. Go into the hands-on. Lambda is interesting. So incident response in the traditional environment has been like this. So we have logs which are being generated. We have which collect the logs and we run the correlation rules on top of them. It generates the emails and sends it to potentially IT or people who own that particular server. And then it is up to them to really address that. Obviously, this is something most of some part of the process is automated, where you obviously have the alerts coming directly going to the owners. Some organizations go a step further; they even directly cut the tickets, and that ticket is cut to the service owner. So for them to address that. In cloud and AWS cloud, you can go a step further. Based on your preset configuration, AWS Lambda is a serverless a service which customers can use, put on a code that will run based on that trigger. So taking the same example,
Amandeep, just sorry to interrupt. Can we try removing the headphones because there is some audio issues? Still, people are not able to hear quite clearly.
Okay, just let me try. Just a sec.
Yeah. Can we try it now?
Any better, Vivek?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So in the incident response, as I said, in AWS Cloud, you can go a step further. AWS Lambda is a serverless service which you can use. It essentially triggers. So if you have a log which is correlated into the same, it alerts and it generates an alert. Based on that alert, Lambda code you can configure, which will automatically remediate that particular incident that has been identified. Let's take an example. If it is identified that a particular port has been opened on a firewall, which gives access to one of your S3 buckets to the public, it automatically generates an alert. You can configure a Lambda rule, which will actually automatically block that port from the firewall. So no mistakes by any administrator, even unintentionally. So those are things that you can actually build and automate within cloud. A last bit on shared responsibility model, there are three actors. One is, of course, cloud service provider that I've talked about. CSC is essentially cloud services customer. So as I said, cloud service customer does own and manage cloud account governance and access control, irrespective whether they are managing the cloud workloads on their own or if they have a managed services provider who is managing the cloud workload for them. Irrespective of that, account governance and access control will always be in the responsibility of the cloud services customer. Log generation, monitoring and storage, scoping and monitoring, change and configuration management, incident management, all those things will always remain in the responsibility of cloud services customer. Same for the MSP. In case you have a third party provider who is managing cloud workloads for you, they can obviously carry some responsibilities or share some responsibilities. It can include identity and access management of the cloud users, configuration management from the operations perspective, change management, but of course, change management has to be integrated with your organization because MSP should not be able to carry out changes without approval from the customer. Patch management, they can do on behalf of the customers. Data protection and incident response, security operations center. You can always build a SOC on top of cloud. So SOC essentially monitors the various logs that come in, even threat intelligence feeds. All those elements can be monitored as part of cloud. And again, this is something that you can always hand over to MSP, and MSP can do it for you. But again, depends on the model and the security and risk appetite that your organization may have. And finally, business continuity and disaster recovery elements for in the cloud part. So I think this was a time when we wanted to run the question, but now we already have the answers. We'll run that question again at the end of the slide deck, and then potentially see if we have a different response than what we got in the question earlier. So these are some of the elements I want to touch on when you are considering auditing cloud workloads. So these are some of the key considerations while you are adopting cloud. So as I said, in our discussion with the customers, with regulators, audit always comes up as one of the key questions. No, we cannot move to cloud because we cannot audit. No, we cannot move to cloud because we cannot audit the CSP. We cannot move to cloud because we cannot log or monitor. We do not have access to logs. So all those things is something that we want to address as part of this section. Number one, whenever you start in your cloud journey, or even if you're already in your cloud journey, make sure you always scope and you are aware of what services you are consuming. In cloud, it's pretty simple. So you don't really need to create an Excel sheet with a list of assets and then identify the owners, all the manual stuff. Or you need to run some discovery tools to really see what all assets software are running. In cloud, by default, everything and anything that you as an instance, that will always be available. And you can use services like AWS config to see what all services you are consuming. Second, understand what major service types are there. So there can be different service types that CSP provides. So make sure that you identify them. Then as part of audit, you also use service map and inventory. So it doesn't mean that if you move to cloud, you will just be done with service mapping or inventory. You need to maintain that for the audit, but that is something which can be automated and done using tools like AWS config. Then ensure services you are consuming are included in the third-party attestation. So this is another important part when you are trying to audit or review a cloud service provider. Make sure the services that you're going to procure, whether it is storage, whether it is networking, whether it is VPC, whether it is EC2, whether it is S3, all the services that you want to use, make sure those are already included as part of third-party attestation. So you don't really want a certificate for the name of it. Okay, we are ISO certified. But what all services are including that ISO certificate, that is something which is very important to understand. Then also you want to basically see and review all the connectivity between network and the cloud platform. So whether there are VPN connections, whether there are direct release line and MPLS connections, if it is being accessed over the internet, that is also something that you need to be aware as an auditor. GRC or governance, risk and compliance. So as a customer, you will still need to train your employees for cloud best practices. This is something that we need to be very cognizant of. Cloud is something which training and awareness becomes a very critical part, because it will provide host of services, host of features, it will actually expand the landscape of what can be achieved using a cloud. But your employees will need to be trained. They will need to be trained to secure the cloud workloads. They will need to be trained to ensure adequate architecture. They'll need to be trained on host of things. So that is something that you will need to have a governance mechanism, that employees who are using cloud, they are always trained and they are skilled enough to manage cloud workloads. Second, risk assessment documentation will still be valid. So as an auditor, you can always ask, if you're auditing a customer or auditing an organization, how are they assessing risks related to the cloud and what are the risk management plans that they have. Next one is relevant risk to the cloud service provider customer. Again, assess and map third-party attestation. So when you audit cloud, what essentially you can do. So you already have access to the audit report
and third-party attestation reports that the CSP publishes, you can always validate the controls. For example, whether they're managing physical security, whether the controls are there, whether access is being segregated, whether the administrative access is being restricted. Host of controls that we obviously check when we visit the data centers, whether CCTV monitoring is there, whether physical access logs are being monitored, whether access is being reviewed on a periodic basis. All those controls that we do have as part of our checklist, all those controls can actually be tested by validating them as part of the third-party attestation and audit reports. Combine CSP attestation and your audit CSC environment to perform the gap analysis. So you may want to see, these are the controls that I want to validate. These are the controls I have tested from the CSP audit reports. And in case there are any gaps, those gaps have to be identified, and obviously then you need to take action on that. Data security is another element that you need to do as part of the audit. Classification is always going to be key. As I said, irrespective whether you are hosting your workloads on-prem or you are hosting your workloads in the cloud, you own and control your data. If you own and control your data, you have to classify the data. CSP will never be aware of how critical your data is. As a CSP, AWS essentially considers everything that customer hosts, it's critical. So for a CSP, we are configuring our infrastructure and our part of security responsibility, considering everything that is hosted is sensitive. So highest level of controls are ensured underlying. But on top of that, whatever applications that you build, whatever configurations that you set, whatever data sets that you host, they have to be classified, and you need to classify those data elements. Then again, methods of connection. How do you really connect to the CSP? You can do it through VPN. You can do it through direct connect, which is dedicated lease line connection. You can also do it over the internet. When in doubt, encrypt everything. Encryption is something which addresses lots of questions that are generally raised in many of the discussions that we have with the customers. Can X access my data? Can Y access my data? Can a government access my data? Can a CSP access your data? When in doubt, encrypt everything. This is something that we want to highlight, that in at least you have encryption that you can virtually encrypt in process, in transit, in storage. So you always can use encryption services to encrypt whatever you host. Then ensure encryption is for all cloud services, right? So you don't really want to just have encryption for the sake of it. You want to encrypt for so that you can actually encrypt entire data in transit, in process, and also in storage. Encryption keys are another important element that as an organization you will need to be very, very cognizant of. As I alluded to it previously, there are multiple ways that you can manage your keys. You can encrypt your data in your infrastructure and only bring encrypted data into the cloud, one of the options. Number two, you can bring in the data and encrypt using CSP services and also using the key management services of the CSP. The third option can be you use the CSP services to encrypt or decrypt, but the keys are supplied by your own key management infrastructure. So you manage your own key management infrastructure. All those things are something that are options available for the customers who obviously have additional compliance or regulatory requirements or even lower risk appetite. This is another area where customers say, okay, I can move to cloud because I do vulnerability assessment and penetration testing for the services that you host on cloud. And obviously, there are a host of services that AWS also supports where you don't even need to reach out to AWS to do the VAPT. For some of the services which are obviously shared with the customers, for them, you will need to reach out to CSP to see how best you can carry out the VAPT. You always should also have visibility into processes of the CSP. Whether CSP is also doing VAPT of their infrastructure, whether that VAPT is being audited by a third party, whether that can be validated through their attestation reports. So all those things you will still need to do. And again, as I said, third-party audit reports have to be available to you, and you should be able to validate whether the VAPT processes of a CSP are actually functioning adequately or not. Monitoring and logging, you should be enabling all the services in your environment to enable logs. You should log virtually anything and everything. This day and age, earlier it used to be concerned, okay, storage is an issue. I don't have terabytes of data. these days, storage at least is virtually very lowly priced, or rather cheap. So essentially, you can host, you can store all the logs that you want. You can build AI/ML services on top of that to correlate the rules. And then, of course, you have services like Lambda, some other services which can help automatic remediation as well. Access management, again, off the cloud is something CSP will be responsible for, but for in the cloud is something that you will need to manage as part of your responsibility. Make sure users, groups, and permissions are created and you actually review those permissions on a periodic basis. It may be dependent on your policy. For example, some organizations do quarterly review of the users, some do half yearly. Again, depends on how frequently you want to review. But all those processes that you have been following in your on-prem data centers, mainly related to access management, will have to be done as part of the cloud environment as well. Then, of course, access to the critical information. As I said, if you move to cloud, automatically everything is secure. That's not the case. Automatically everything is insecure. That's also not the case. It's something that you will still have to do. So you have the underlying secure infrastructure, but you still have to manage access of your critical infrastructure, your critical data, classification of the data, implementing controls based on the classification. All that still has to be done as part of your cloud journey as well. Root access in the cloud, again, this is one area which I want to highlight very clearly. Root is, although as part of our on-prem environments, we have always said, okay, don't use root accounts, don't use root database user, don't use root or super admin or local admin on your servers, which is true. But in cloud, it is even more critical. Because root in cloud means you virtually have that root account has access to anything and everything in your cloud environment. When I say your cloud environment, just treat it as your data center. So your root account has access to your entire logical data center, which is in the cloud. So if root account is not managed adequately, that root user virtually can even delete all the entire data center without much of a knowledge. A huge impact, but you need to manage that access well. So let's take an example. Do not use root account for your day-to-day operations. It's only for the first time when you need to configure the cloud, you have root, but then just change it, remove the access for root, have a sealed envelope password, keep it somewhere secure, never use root account. You can create administrative users, you can create users who can do all the administrative activities, but do not really use root account for any of the daily operations. That is one of the most important things that I would suggest as a security professional for the cloud. Business continuity and disaster recovery. This is another area where we do have conversations with customers. They do mention, okay, how do I ensure disaster recovery in the cloud? This is something which is also very interesting and also relatively smoother if you want to achieve your disaster recovery objectives. When I say disaster recovery or business continuity objectives, we mean RTO and RPO, recovery time objective or recovery point objective. How fast you want to recover, recovery time objective, and how much are you ready to really lose the data. So RPO means if you're okay to lose 30 minutes of data, so you can have your backup set after every 30 minutes, you should have your backup back into your disaster recovery site. If your risk appetite is low and if you want virtually no data loss, you should have your RPO as 0. RTO essentially means how quickly you want to recover, whether you accept 4 hours. Okay, within 4 hours, my operation should be up and running in case the primary site goes down. So RTO is 4 hours. But some organizations these days, especially in the cloud landscape, I've seen organizations who have 0 RTO and 0 RPO, which means they don't want data loss even for a minute, and they want their operations to be running up and running all the time. So that is transparent to their customers, to their employees, that actually primary site ever went down. So it's an active redundancy that you can build as part of the cloud infrastructure. One more element that you need to be cognizant of, I'm again specifically here talking about AWS. So AWS, as I said, we build our regions in the construct of availability zones. Each availability zone has multiple data centers. And then each data center, that can have multiple floors, hundreds of racks in each of the data center. The way we build our data centers, we ensure resiliency and redundancy is built at each level. So if a server goes down, there should be alternate within probably in the same data center. If a data center goes down within the AZ, another data center should be able to support the redundancy. If the entire AZ goes down, that should still not impact customers from having backup in the other AZ. So all those inherently resilient services are already built, which customers can leverage, and be rest assured from the disaster recovery perspective, their objectives will be able to be met. And one more thing, which we need to be some questions come up from the customers. How do we really identify the distance between the primary site and the disaster recovery site? So to answer your question, it is purely driven by the business requirements. As I said, if your business requirements, let's say if you are an online retail, online service that you want to provide, like let's say Amazon.in, obviously there is not even 1 minute that you would want that customers should not be able to access and you can accept downtime. You cannot, right? So essentially you will have to have your operations running 24/7 and resiliency built for 0 RT and 0 RPO. For those kind of environments, again, the distance is something that you need to be cognizant of. Your data centers and availability zones should be far enough so that if one goes down, it does not impact the second. That is something which is important for disaster recovery. But it should also be not that far that it impacts the 0 RPO and RTO objectives that we have. Because the distance, more distance you increase every 50, 100 kilometers, you will start losing milliseconds of data replication. Again, it will start impacting your RTO and RPO. When we say how do you identify the distance, it purely depends on your recovery time objective and recovery point objective. Next one is configuration and change management. As I said, configurations of the applications, workloads which are hosted in the cloud, you will be managing that. So you make sure you have adequate configuration and change management practices, even built for the cloud workloads. So you manage your particular banking application, your HR application, your finance application, your employee portal in your on-prem environment, you continue to do that even in your cloud environment. So those things will not change. And that is something which also is audited as part of the auditor for your organization. And all the points that I mentioned here, all these things can actually be audited by your auditors with your access. So you don't even need any support from a CSP to audit all these elements. This is one element that I want to highlight. Last, as I mentioned, so CSP is responsible for managing the infrastructure and any incidents that may impact hypervisor or underlying infrastructure. CSP should have processes to manage those incidents. While as a customer, anything guest operating system and on top of that, all the applications, all the incidents management logs are obviously managed by the customer. As I said, for most of the requests that we see and for most of the investigations that the customers do, the logs that they have access to, whether it is CloudTrail, whether it is CloudWatch, whether it is file integrity logs, whether it is a database logs, whether it is access logs, all the different host of logs that can be built within your cloud environment, customers already have access to that. So in case of an incident, you will have access to all the logs, so you don't even need any support from CSP to really help in your incident investigations. However, in case there are incidents which are impacting outside your workload, so essentially if it is impacting the underlying infrastructure, that is where the CSP's responsibility will also come in. Security of the cloud. So these are some of the common questions. So one key takeaway or expectation that we saw at the start of the session, people wanted to know, can I really comply in laws and regulations while using cloud? Answer is yes, and these are the details of that. Number one, customers ask, okay, how can I make sure that data localization and residency is there? So my data, because I moved to cloud, I don't know where my data is. The cloud service provider has data centers across the world. They can always move the data from X to Z. This is not how it really works. Essentially, data localization is something, if that is a mandate, you own and control your data. You select the region where you want to host your data. And if you select the region wherever you want to host, CSP, as AWS as CSP, we never move your data from one region to another. Number two, if you pick Mumbai region as your data, your data will always reside in Mumbai region. From the physical data center audit, so again, customers have questions, okay, how do I audit physical data center, whether the physical data center controls are there or not. So let's take that question heads on. Then we visit a data center to do an audit. We don't really see anything logical, right? We just go there, see whether the perimeter security is adequate, whether the CCTV is there, whether utilities are being managed, whether physical access is being controlled, whether physical access is being logged, whether temperature is being managed, whether humidity is being managed, what are the controls on equipment maintenance and management. All these controls are just the examples what we audit when we visit the data center, right? Those controls are to be tested, and those controls are already being audited as part of the multiple compliance programs, whether it is ISO, whether it is Ministry of IT, whether it is, I don't know, specific regulations across the globe and also applicable in India. If all those things are already being audited and attested by the third-party auditors, and those third-party audit reports are being published for you as a customer to validate whether the controls in the CSP data center are adequate, you should be able to check that from the audit report and comply and validate, okay, yeah, these controls are already there. So I think that is where the third-party testing reports come in very, very handy for you to meet your question related to physical data center audit. Another one related to is privacy and data security. One question that we look at, okay, does government access my data? Can government access your data? Answer is AWS does not disclose customer information, and it enables customers to manage their own encryption keys. So we do not really share any customer data with the government unless required to do so by legally binding order. If there's a legally binding order of a request for a particular step, that is something which we may need to share. But then there are two things that we have to highlight here. One, we will, in most circumstances, highlight it to the customer, but this is something request has come in and you may want to get a stay order from the court. Number two, encryption. As I said, it's your best friend. Encrypt everything. If your data is encrypted and you don't have people who don't have encryption keys, the data is rendered useless. So I think encryption is another area which you can obviously use as part of your privacy and data security. Finally, the physical separation in the multi-tenant environment. Again, there are a host of controls that AWS implements to provide industry best tenant separation. When we say tenant separation, what it means that when you host it in your storage, when you use the compute, your instances will be totally segregated from the other customers. So one customer will never be able to access the workloads of another customer. So that is level of segregation that we have built. And again, this is something which can be validated and is actually audited as part of the third-party audits. So I think can we go to the another next question in the Kahoot?
Sure, Amandeep. So let me share my screen.
Okay.
Just a minute. Yeah. So next question is that who owns the controls data in cloud environment? Who owns and controls the data in cloud environment? Yeah, so I think most of the audience answered right. So it is cloud service customer. So let's see. Okay. 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 Munesh answered rightly and quickly. So, Amandeep, shall we go to the next question? Hello? Okay. So I hope you have rejoined on Kahoot. All of you, please rejoin on Kahoot. So it's a kahoot.it. So now next question is that how do you determine the distance between your primary and secondary data center? So just now we had a conversation about it, how to choose it. So it should be different seismic zone or apart from 100 or 500 kilometers, distance doesn't matter, or based on business continuity objective, RTO and RPO, which Amandeep talked about. Yeah, so maximum people are saying based on organization business continuity objective. And I think that's the right answer. Okay. So Amandeep, shall we go to the next question?
I think let's hold the next question for the coming slide.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen now.
Yeah, I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Can you see my screen, Vivek?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Just a sec. I need to do one thing. Because in this section now we are going to do some hands-on on some of the console elements. Can you see my screen now? Vivek, can you confirm if you can see the slide?
See the presentation slide, Amandeep.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Automation. So this section, I'm just going to give you a brief hands-on experience on whatever we have talked about. So we have touched on, okay, how you can secure the data, how you can audit the data. I want to give you some hands-on view of how it can be done by using AWS Cloud. Of course, 2-hour session is not really sufficient or ever enough to dive into all the span of breadth of services that it offers, but we will try to touch on some of the elements related to this session. So the elements that I would want to touch on for today's session are 5. Number 1, account governance and access control. In AWS Cloud, how do you govern access and how do you control access using IAM service? So that is something which I'll give you a brief overview of. Number 2, automation. We said that compliance can be automated in the cloud, even audit can be automated in the cloud. So we will see how we can use services like AWS config to really audit and comply. Number 3, I'll talk about VPC security groups and encryption. How you can. Number 4, data localization. So this is one question which comes up with how do I make sure that data which I host in cloud, it stays where I really want it to. So there are some tools that you can use to validate that. There are options.
Amandeep, sorry to interrupt. There is some audio disturbance. Can you switch on your camera? I think it's because of that. Maybe. We are not able to see you.
Fresh.
There are some issues. So we lost Amandeep. So I think he's rejoining. So meanwhile, Aman's joined. I think most of you had a problem joining on Kahoot. So again, I will share my screen and I will run you through the quiz that we are playing. Just give me a moment. Yeah. So just a moment. Yeah, so you go to kahoot.it, so kahoot.it, and once you go there, you need to enter this game pin. So now I think the game pin has been refreshed. So you can go to kahoot.it and put this game pin 4189387, and you can rejoin again. And I will guide you through that how to play this quiz. Okay, so you need to put the put this pin again. This is the new pin now. So I'm requesting everyone to join it. So let's wait for some time. Okay, so once you join, you will have a question on your screen, right? So you need to see the options on the screen. So and you need to choose the respective icon on your cell phone. For example, if you want to choose answer is that it is a shared responsibility model, and for that particular answer, if there is a triangle assigned to that answer, so if you need to choose, then you need to choose a triangle on your screen. If you need to choose answer all of them, and the circle assigned to that answer, then you have to choose a circle on your screen. So with respect to the right answer, there will be icons assigned to it. So you need to choose that particular icon on your screen. Right? So let's start now. I think all of you join, and I will skip the first question, and we will let's play one more time, because I think most of you face difficulties while playing it. So let's play as a dummy question again. What is what yeah. So let's play the next question now. I hope. Okay. So now, who is responsible for security in the cloud environment? And we have discussed it, right? So whether it is cloud service provider, cloud service customer, managed service provider, or security shared responsibility. So please select the right icon. Yeah, so I think that is all. So most of the people got right it this time. That security is a shared responsibility on a cloud, whereas cloud service provider will be responsible for managing the infrastructure, making the compute infrastructure, and customer will be responsible for securing the data and implementing those security controls which are required. Okay, so now I think most of you got that how to play. So Prajot, who have answered it quickly, so he's got maximum points. Okay, so next question is about who owns and controls the data in the cloud environment. So just remember the diagram which Amandeep was talking about. Who owns what? So data is at the upper layer. Yeah, so I think most of you got it right. It's a cloud service customer who owns the data and responsible for implementing necessary controls and processes to protect the data on a cloud. So I think Amandeep had joined back, and so I think let's play one more question, because last time people were not able to join this question also. How do you determine the distance between your primary and secondary data center? So it is based on a seismic zone or with kilometer restrictions. It doesn't matter, or based on your organization's objective in terms of RTO and RPO. Right. I think 14 people have answered right. It is based on organization's business continuity objectives that you will choose your secondary data center, which is a DR, disaster recovery data center. Okay, I think Amandeep, just meanwhile you join, we just played the quiz right from the beginning. And this time, I think maximum people, more than 70 to 80% people are saying that, yes, it is a shared responsibility of security and privacy on the cloud. I think that was the objective behind conducting this workshop, and most of the people are now thinking on that direction. Okay, I'll just stop sharing my screen and I'll hand over to you for the rest of the demonstration.
I not really question. I think the answers that you see from the business continuity part. I know has said that it can be distance, it can be seismic zone, it can be hydrometeorology. If that answer is driven by the compliance or regulatory requirement, then your answer is right. However, RTO and RPO, and your business objective should already consider the compliance and regulatory requirement. So if your compliance or regulatory requirement is that you need to have XYZ kilometers distance between your primary and a secondary data center, then you have to make sure that your continuity objectives and RTO and RPO are in line with those compliance requirements. That's the reason your focus should be to have your business continuity objectives clearly defined. That will be based on compliance requirements. That will be based on your business requirements. That will be based on what type of business you are in. So I think all those factors will form as an input for defining your RTO and RPO. So answer when it comes to distance might have been driven due to compliance, but that also should be part of RTO and RPO itself. So I was on this slide where I just wanted to tell you that these are some of the elements I want to touch base on and potentially go into and show you how identity and access is managed. So let's, without any further ado, because I think we're talking about disaster recovery and we have had a couple of instances of just we couldn't connect. So first, I want to give you a view on console. How does it really look like? Let's go to sign in. Again, as I said, never log in using your account. This is something which I use for the multi-factor authentication. Again, you can have the tokens. MFA is always required for me to log into this administrative account that I'm currently using. So this is the overall how console really looks like when we talk about AWS. There are a host of services that you have on compute, containers, storage, databases, whether it is managed databases or whether it is relational databases or whether it is non-relational databases. Migration and transfer. Migration is another topic which comes up in our discussions. Customers say, okay, if I move to cloud, how do I come out? So there are a host of services that you can use for migrating in and out of cloud as your requirement might be. For governance, so there are a host of services that you can see here, more than 175 plus services. And obviously we keep on expanding on features and services year on year. So if you see here, let's type IAM. That is the first part that I just want to give you a brief overview of. I'm cognizant of time because I would like to wrap up this session by 11:15, so that at least 15 minutes we have for some Q&A. So this is the dashboard that you will see for users. If you see your identity and access management module, you can see which all users are already configured. So for today's session, I have configured Rising. This is what user I'm using. Then this is India user. India user is something which I've created specifically to showcase. You can also restrict your users to leverage services on AWS Cloud which are limited to an X region. So this user will only have access to view or do anything in Mumbai region. This India user cannot have this in US or Europe, so that control can be built in. Third is DSE user. This is a user which we can say it's an auditor user. This user will only be able to view the resources. He cannot edit. He cannot shoot new instances. It is mainly to provide a view access to a particular user. But again, when you actually see each user, you as an auditor from security perspective, you need to see what policies are applied. So, for example, here I'm using I am user change control policy. You can go to the groups. What groups are they a part of? Okay, Rise India is admin and it provides the administrative privileges. Let's see what these permissions are all about. It's all that simple. Let you know. Go down here, and this is the policy that you see. It's a very simple JSON policy version. So, being an administrator, this user will have access to anything and everything that particular user can access. Again, this is not root, but this is an administrator. And again, for us, we can always edit these policies based on our requirements. And this is essentially what we will see when we actually go and log in as a different user. So we can.
Amandeep, just sorry to interrupt again. I think again there is echoing something. Can you try switching to maybe? Are you using some earphones or something?
I can use now.
Because it is still echoing. Most of the audience are not able to hear properly. They are hearing echo.
Let me try. Vivek?
Seems better. Yeah.
So, apologies in case we are having some technology challenges, but work from home, we just kind of overcome this. So here I was saying that
No,
obviously,
no. Amandeep, not yet. Not yet. I think there's some audio issues.
let me connect to my headset just a second.
Okay, so are you able to hear me clearly, or it's an issue with? Okay, so is it okay? Just we are trying to fix it. Okay, thanks for the confirmation. So I apologize behalf of team. So we are just working on the better audio quality.
Can you hear me, Vivek? Any better?
Yeah.
Can you see me also?
Yes.
Okay. Only thing is, wait. No echo, right? Perfect. Let me share my screen again.
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies for that. So I was saying that I don't know how much did you hear when I was going through that. So I just went into the dashboard for IAM, Identity and Access Management Service in AWS. Here you can see a set of users, groups, roles that are created for this particular account. And in the users, you can see these are the different users which exist. And currently, I'm logged in using Rise India. So you can see for Rise India, what are the permissions which are aligned, what groups this particular user is part of. It is administrative access. You can again click and see what this administrative access does allow to this particular user. So when you go to the permissions, you can always see a policy. Okay, it does allow star star, which means all access because this is the administrative user. This is not a root user, but this is a user created as an administrator with a specific policy. So when you audit, or even as a security professional, when you configure any of the policies, you need to make sure you see which users exist, what roles are connected, and what groups are there this particular user is part of. And then, of course, you can always see what permissions each user has. So this is one element that you need to be very, very aware of. Again, you can see what all different groups currently I have. So there are these groups that I've created. Again, these groups you can always assign to the particular user that you may want that particular user to be part of. Another element, I think, let's go to the next one. You can verify the users, you can verify the groups, you can verify the roles, review associated policies, like I showed the permissions that you can review, and from the organization as well. So there's a concept of AWS organization in which if you have multiple accounts, so you don't have one AWS account, but you have multiple AWS accounts, you can always govern all the accounts using the organizations. Which organization or which account will have what privileges, and you can even create a separate account altogether, which is to monitor all other accounts. So this is another, as I said, visibility can be provided to the auditors with these accounts, and even potentially the regulators. So we see the traditional environment, which is still very prevalent, where auditors come every 3 months or every 6 months. They want to check the roles, they want to check the access log, they want to check who has what access, they want to audit certain things. Why don't we just automate it, right? Create an account for the auditor or the regulator, provide them access, view only access to elements that they anyways audit after 6 months. They have visibility into that. You can even trigger logs and alerts for your auditors to be aware of in case something goes wrong. So it's kind of a continuous audit cycle that can be enforced using these services. Automation. This is another element which I will want to show here, which is AWS config. AWS config is a service which I'll go to now. And the level of depth and ease of conformance and compliance that can be done using cloud, you will see it's really amazing compared to what we were used to in our traditional on-prem environments. So AWS config essentially provides you, or if you have to use that word, inventory of all the services, all the roles, all the cloud resources that are running in your account. You will have view to everything. So currently in this account, I see there are 110 resources which are being used. These include the roles, keys for the quick encryption, IAM policies, EC2 subnets, IAM groups, EC2 network interfaces. All those things I can see in one window, what all is running. The beautiful part of compliance is this. You have set rules. Based on your rules, you can see what a particular, if any non-compliance is done, automatically you will get to know seeing from this rule. So there are a couple of policies. One is CloudTrail encryption. So I have set a rule where CloudTrail logs have to be enabled. And once CloudTrail logs are enabled, those logs have to be encrypted. If they are not encrypted, automatically I will get dashboard. Okay, these are the non-compliant resources. And secondly, what are the things that we can do? You can go a step further. You can use something like, okay, you don't want to create the rules, right? You just want to use a particular requirement. Then in that case, you can always also set up the conformance packs. So if you go to conformance pack, let's say I want to deploy a conformance pack. I want to create my own template, or I want to use a standard template. So templates that AWS already provides includes operational best practices like ABS, AWS Identity and Access Management. Or let's say if you want to just go and see against PCI DSS, how do my infrastructure really stands up? So I will use this template. The template is nothing but a set of rules which will audit all the sources that are in your cloud environment and see whether you comply or do not comply with the PCI DSS requirements. Let's name it as DSCI for simplicity. Right? Currently, I'm using US region again for a purpose because I want to showcase something from the other users as well. So it's currently in process of being deployed. Once this conformance pack is deployed, automatically the dashboard that we saw one or two non-compliances based on the rules that I have added, that will automatically change. So I think that is something which we will get to know once this conformance pack is deployed. Let's get back to that. Once this is deployed, I think it will take another couple of seconds rather. And then there's a concept of CloudFormation as well. So CloudFormation are templates that you can, like infrastructure as a code. If we have heard about that term, what it means, you put together a code of creating. Okay, I want to create a compute. I want to have this much RAM. I want to have this database. I want to have these many instances. All those things can be coded in a template, which we call a CloudFormation template. Once you codify that, so instead of going and configuring each and every instance and each and every element of your network, you run that CloudFormation template. It automatically deploys the infrastructure across your cloud environment. This is something which is used not only for, operational excellence. Of course, it helps you operationally, and it also helps you provide the gold copy. So in case you want to set up something based on preset configuration, use only these templates. And finally, the security as well. So if you are configuring your resources based on the CloudFormation template, as a security professional, as a CISO, as an auditor, review those CloudFormation templates and see whether those CloudFormation templates comply with the security policies. Again, similar to CloudFormation, this is something that we do provide pre-configured templates that you may want to use, but you can also create on your own if you have coders in your organization. Then there are quick starts as well. Quick starts are similar, which use the CloudFormation templates, but they address a particular set of requirements. For example, if you want to shoot up an infrastructure which is by default compliant with PCI DSS, use a PCI DSS quick start. Go ahead, download the quick start, follow the steps, implement. Automatically the servers and the infrastructure that will be set up, that will be compliant to the PCI DSS requirements. And of course, CloudTrail and CloudWatch is something that we can always use for the logging as well. So we can see now here, the conformance pack has been deployed. Let's see if it has had any impact on the dashboard. So we saw there were only 2 non-compliance, and now we see there are 30 non-compliant rules against the PCI DSS conformance pack. So all those things that we're talking about, password policy, internet gateway, I am user, all those things that have now been identified as non-compliant. So this is how simple it is in case you want to really automate compliance within AWS Cloud. Again, you can go to next level, as I said. I don't have time right now, but potentially maybe sometime in future if we meet, you can even go ahead and automate the remediation as well. So if you have a non-compliant rule, you can always set up a remediation and maybe add a Lambda function, which will automatically remediate, maybe encrypt those instances, set up a policy, maybe segregate into different network segment, all that can actually be done. This in the slide itself, due to paucity of time. Number 1, overview of VPC. So VPC is actually a virtual private cloud. As I said, it's kind of a logical data center within the cloud for you. Entire thing within the VPC is managed and controlled by you. What servers you add, what databases you add, what subnets you add, what access you add, whether you want to add an internet gateway or not, whether you want to just connect that VPC with your data center, you don't want any public access at all. And for the people who have some exposure into networking, they know there's a concept of private IP addresses and public IP addresses. For anyone to communicate over internet, you need a public IP address. So if you don't really configure public IP address for any of your VPC elements, there is no way technically possible that anyone from the internet can ever access that particular infrastructure element. So those are the depth of details that you can always set up. And also the usual suspects, the routing tables that we are, some of our networking friends will actually vouch for it. So route table is something that you can set. You can set up network access control list and security groups. Security groups act like a firewall for you. So if you are setting up a VPC, then within VPC you have a subnet. On the subnet, you can set a security group. What is allowed in, what is allowed out. You can do it based on IP addresses. You can do it based on the group of IPs or even the IP as well. And finally, encryption and key management is something that I have talked about so another element what you can do. So as I said, data localization is one of the concerns that sometimes pops up in discussions with our Indian customers. So there are multiple ways. So you can do it through web. So any of the whois tools or what is my IP address tools, just look out at the server, whatever server that you're using in the cloud. Let's say if you have to go to this particular instance. Instances, one instance is running, and let's keep this networking. So currently we see there is one public IP address which is provided here. So let's do one thing. Instead of Virginia, let's go to Mumbai regional. Let's see if we have a instance running. Yes, we do. Networking. There is an IP address here. If I have to, I do 58. Just see where this particular IP address is. So we know that this is a EC2 instance, this is corporate, and this is already hosted in Maharashtra and Mumbai, and exactly location is also coming. This is a third-party validation, I mean, open internet tool that you can use to validate whether your IP address is hosted and where exactly your server is hosted, because your servers will have a few that is accessible. Then even through the EC2 instance, you can obviously validate, and then one beautiful command that we can use is traceroute. You can traceroute from your to your server, and you will know, okay, where exactly it is. This is something which can be done. Restrict or limit access to specific regions. This is one thing which I would want to show you because I know we are. So let's sign out from this user, which is admin user. Let's sign in again. I would want to this time use India user. India user essentially, which, as I said, mainly having access only to the India region. So once I logged in here, you saw that it was logging into a US region. This user is automatically coming into the Mumbai And if I have to go and see the EC2 instances in Mumbai, yes, this user will be able to do whatever the other user will be able to do, but the limitation will be only for the Mumbai region. But let's try and change it to, let's say, Virginia, because as you know, we have instances running in Virginia as well. Let's go to the dashboard. Oops. API error, which means I do not have access, or this user does not have any access to see, view, or do anything on any of the region outside India. And if we have to just validate that, we can even do that through our IAM policy. Let's go here again. Let's use price. Vector for my administrator account. One thing I just wanted to show you before I move ahead and we wrap up this session is users. Let me say how easy it is for the policy. We went to the India user, right? Let's see which group it is part of. India region full access. Let's have a look at the policy. How this policy really looks like. And if you will have a look at the policy, you will see it has the editor access allow. Star, you can do that. User can do anything and everything in that, but on the cloud, but limited to only this. So this is the code that we use for Mumbai region, AP South 1. If your organization has operation in, let's say, 3 different countries and region, you can obviously add those 3 regions as part of the access. So this is a level of detail and permission that you can build as part of your cloud journey. That is something that you will have to do. So it's not something that you can just to the CSP. All those configurations will have to be managed and owned by your team. One good example of automatic compliance, as I said, this is something which is a live example. This is something which customer has implemented. It's not something a theoretical thing. So let's say there's a network which is running, and currently there is an unpatched system which has been connected to the network. In a typical scenario, we have to obviously take a downtime, identify the test environment, test the patch, and then implement the patch, maybe have another downtime, and then again run it again. But in cloud environment, because you have virtually limitless resources that you can exploit, shoot up another instance not connected to the network, patch it, and make sure that the configuration is similar to this one. As part of maintenance, just change your configuration routing rule here on this, so that that particular traffic starts getting routed to the patch system. Throw away this unpatched system. You don't need to even use it. So it's not something for the server, because now you have a server, you have to live with it. In cloud environment, you create, use, throw. If you don't use, shut it down. If you shut it down, if you don't even need to keep it, just delete it and you are done. This is something which was actually implemented by customer, and their patching cycle came down from, I think, hours, and now they can actually do the patching, I think, within minutes. Last section, just 3 minutes I like to say. So there are a host of tools and services that you have access to. So for your cloud environment, you can always refer to the cloud adoption framework. What are the things that you are considering? There are various host of white papers that are available to help you in your cloud journey. IAM, login monitoring, infrastructure security, data protection. So all those things you can refer to in your cloud journey. And most importantly, if you want a third-party independent standards, CIS also has benchmarks for AWS Cloud. So you can always refer to these benchmarks and configure your cloud workloads accordingly. So this is a slide which potentially maybe all these elements can be shared with you after this session. This provides a list of resources and how you can access them, and most of them are free of cost. Third-party audit reports in AWS. There is a service called Artifact. So any customer, any AWS customer, irrespective of what level, what type of service they are using, they have access to Artifact. If you go to Artifact, you can always list all the audit reports that AWS is being audited against, and you can obviously leverage or refer to those reports in your own internal and compliance requirements. So all those reports are accessible to all the AWS customers without any difference. Most important thing, in case audit reports and the current controls that we have talked about, if you think they are still not adequate to meet your additional regulatory compliance requirements, then there are additional audit offerings also that you can always reach out to AWS for. So for customers who are in regulated industries, and if there's a specific regulation which mandates that you need to have audit for 1, 2, 3, or maybe have additional insights than what other tools and services provide. There are 3 additional engagement options for you. One is the compliance briefings. So audit reports will provide you the control, but if you want a dive deep expert who comes there and explain it to you, okay, what essentially the compliance briefing, what controls do we have, what are the various, and how do we really implement the controls? So compliance briefings will help you achieving that. Second is professional services. So AWS professional services is a professional services arm of AWS, which on scope you can always reach out to them and they will help you dive deep into some of the audit practices. Last but not the least, and one of the important announcements for today's session, AWS Audit Symposium is another thing which customers in India have an option to use. So customers in the regulated industry, customers who have additional regulations or compliance requirements that they really want additional support for supporting their own internal compliance or regulatory requirements, please reach out to us and we will be able to support you to host an audit symposium. When we say audit symposium essentially is a 4-day deep dive workshop where you will get access to the audit portal. Audit portal is something where you will see the list of all the evidences that we generate as part of our different audits, and those evidences you should be able to have a look, and even your teams can then have additional assurance mechanisms to make sure, yes, the controls which are documented in the third-party decision reports, they are actually working the way they should. So I think audit symposium is another mechanism that you can use to address your audit requirements. This is just a sample agenda of how audit symposium really looks like. As I said, it's a 4-day event. It's a very, very deep dive, hands-on audit portal event, which gives you insights into lots of things and all the things that go into when you audit AWS Cloud from the CSP side. For auditing cloud on your side, you don't need any support from the CSP. And this is the audit portal example I was telling about. So this is how the audit portal looks like. These are various areas. For each area, there are programs. And for each program, we will have the evidences that obviously can be downloaded on the PDF. And so access obviously is restricted. It's not available over the internet, and all the control mechanisms are put in place. So this is all from the session perspective. I know that we have run beyond time, but we'll get back to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Amandeep. We have a few questions here, and I will take a few of them. So one question which is asked by by Sudeep. What are the ISO standards CSP are required to comply with?
Okay, so question has 2 elements. One, what ISO standards are required. So from the requirement perspective, as a CSP, we have the Ministry of Electronics and IT. For us to get empaneled with Ministry of Electronics and IT, you need to comply with 4 different ISO standards: ISO 27001, ISO 27017, ISO 27018, ISO 20000 as well. But beyond that, we also have certifications for ISO 9000. But if you are talking about what is required, these are the 4 standards required for a CSP to get empaneled with Ministry of IT. However, apart from Ministry of IT, there are no other regulations which mandate any of those standards.
Yeah, right. So another question which is asked, as AWS has one region in India, what do you suggest as an optimal strategy for business continuity, considering the data localization?
I think from business continuity perspective, as I suggest, so one region in AWS doesn't really mean one data center. One region essentially means multiple availability zones, which are spread across the geographic area. So it's not something just 1 kilometer next building. It's something significant distance, so that if one AZ goes down, the second AZ will not be impacted. So you can always multi-AZ architecture for your disaster recovery objectives. Again, localization is not really a concern because region is in India, data will be in India. Availability zones, as long as you choose those availability zones, they will always stay in India. So it addresses both the DR objectives as well as your localization.
Yeah. One question which is asked by Vikram, he's asking that how does one shall deal targeting or regarding the auditing concerns related to the multi-cloud? So if someone is adopting the multi-cloud, how we should deal with the auditing that respect to that?
So multi-cloud is another element which does come up in some of our discussions, and in many of the customer discussions who are customers who still have to start the journey on the cloud, they always think about multi-cloud. But more they start adopting a particular service or a particular cloud, the breadth of software that they see from AWS, the more comfortable they get. Actually, one cloud is potentially better for them. It provides them cost savings. It provides them the breadth of services that potentially which is unmatched in any of the cloud service provider. And more importantly, for their employees, the technical employees, IT employees, to manage multiple cloud environments, it's really going to be a gigantic effort. So it's not something that you can just always do one cloud and two clouds. So the more cloud vendors you have, more training and awareness and skills that you will need in your IT environments. But to answer the question regarding the audit, that is the audit practice, right? So there are audits which are available to audit any CSP. I talked about the key considerations. Those key considerations are applicable for all the cloud service providers. So it again depends on what you really want to achieve as part of your audit. But from a CSP perspective, as AWS, if your auditor wants to audit as part of multi-cloud or localization or whatever, we are always open and willing to support.
Yeah, there are, I think, 3 or 4 more questions, but in the interest of time, I will take one question only. So, Nidhi is asking, do you provide data center tours?
Data center tours.
Yeah.
So data center tours are available to our auditors, the third-party auditors who come and audit our data centers, whether it is ISO, whether it is PCI, whether it is SOC auditors, or even as part of the Ministry of IT Empanelment, as I said, SCQC auditors who actually audit and do visit our data centers to validate the physical and environmental security controls. So that's how we really address the requirement around physical data center tours. Why we don't really encourage each and every customer to really come and visit a data center, because at the end of the day, it's really going to impact your security and your data, which is hosted in the cloud. We have millions of active customers. If all the millions of active customers start visiting the data center, I mean, you can. I'm sure that it will not be our concern. It essentially will be the concern of the customers, because you don't really want all of the millions of the data center where your data is hosted. But from our side, one thing is for sure: we provide as much visibility, transparency through our audit reports, through our compliance program, that essentially what you go and visit the data center, you only see the blinking lights. There's nothing more you can see. You really want to see how we manage our physical security? Auditors validate that. How do we manage our physical environmental security controls? Audit reports validate that. If there is any control in the report which you think does not cover your specific requirement, do reach out to us. We'll be more than willing and more than happy to address that particular requirement, and maybe potentially include that as part of our existing reports as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks, Amandeep. I think it was really nice and engaging session. Audience also asked certain valuable questions, and I still see there are 2 to 3 questions. But in the interest of time, I will pose those questions offline to you, and then we can answer to those participants. So thanks, Amandeep. Thank you so much, and thanks, audience, for being with us and engaging with us, asking those valuable questions. I thank everyone again. I'm requesting, yeah, okay, and I'm requesting everyone to join us for the plenary session, which is happening into the audit. Thank you, everyone.